I've got a tray with, it's a regular muffin or cupcake tray, 6 by 4, so 24 we'll make here at once. What I do is I start with chunks of wax that I've broken up from a big cube, put them in a pot and melted them down in this pot. So it's currently, hot. I've got kiln dried wood chips that I've chipped through my chipper shredder, and I've got candle wax coated hardwood wicks that I'll stick in once it's the right time. So we'll just go through this, show you how I make these. Not rehearse this, so if we make any mistakes, you'll see me make them. So we start by pouring in just a little bit of wax to get it so we have wax on the bottom of the mold. And then we randomly grab some of the wood chips, put them in each of the containers, and we'll come back in a minute and kind of top them off, and then we'll fill them with some more hot wax. So I do 6 at once, and the reason is you want the wax, when it's all done in the fire starter, to be, excuse me, to be the right, look like it was all poured at the same time. I've tried this a number of times, different ways, and you can't pour it all at once. You can't put the wood chips in first and then pour the wax. You've got to have some wax in there to begin with. So now we've got wood chips in there, and now we fill it up so it's just to the top. And what happens is the dried wood chips are going to absorb a little bit of the wax. So even though I look like I'm filling it up to the brim, in a minute I'll have to come back and top it off so that the fire starter is full to the brim. So when I do the first 6, I can move right on to the next 6. So there we've got the first 6 done. We'll come back and top them off in a minute, but we move right on to the next 6. And it's just kind of an eyeball thing. You see how much you think you need. About 1/3 of the height is what I usually try to do on the first go around. And then with either hand, one hand gets tired, I use the other hand, but just grab with my hand a little pile of wood chips, stick them in. If they fall randomly into the other cups, I don't worry about it, because when the wax goes into those, it'll be just right. It'll fill them up, and we'll get a good fill. So you can see that's what I do. I've just tried to make it about even with the top. Nothing has got to be perfect, and there's always spillover of both wax and wood chips that I don't worry too much about. There's actually very little waste to all this. Speaking of waste, this is actually recycled kiln dried wood that I got, and the wax has already been used, and it's being repurposed for for fire starter. So it's reclaimed wax, and it's really reclaimed wood that would otherwise be a waste product. So now we go back and just re-top these off and just watch that they're flush with the tops. And then we start on the next row. And just keep going. And again, they don't all have to be exactly the same. The combination of the wood chips and the wax, they're both a combustible product, and that's what makes them a fire starter. And so it doesn't have to be perfect. The main thing that causes these to burn for so long, and they do burn for on a average an hour and 15 minutes, so quite a while. This will burn. You just stick it in an empty metal cup, so once the wax starts melting and burning, you don't want it to flow away if it's on a flat surface. So you stick it in like an empty tin cup, metal cup. You could also use aluminum foil. Shape it like a cup so the wax, as it's melting and burning, doesn't flow away. Then it'll burn for an hour and 15 minutes. So now we have 3 done, and what we want to do now is just, we're going to stick a wooden wick in here in a minute. But what helps the wooden wick stay straight is having a few more wood chips on top. And you'll see what I've been talking about in a second. You don't want the wick to fall over. You want it to be standing straight up. And if it's stuck it in the hot wax too soon, it would fall over. So now what we do is you just take this, just kind of work it in, and it'll stay in position. So these are candle wax coated wicks that I've pre-cut and pre-soaked in wax. And you can see how I just work them into the containers. And those, once they've dried, are going to be nice and firm. And sometimes I have to take just a little bit more wood chips to keep the wick from falling over. And as they start to solidify and the wax cools, I'll re-look at them to make sure they're still as straight as I think they ought to be. You just stick them in. And these are eventually going to cool, get hard, like you saw at the beginning of the video there. Stay firm and usable. There we go. We go to the next last row here. I'll go down and just top off this 3rd row. It's had time to soak in. And we just kind of eyeball it, looking like we have about the right amount in each one. That looks good. And then we fill the last row up with more of the hot wax. And because I've poured the second pour after the wood chips are in relatively soon after the first pour has been made, before I put the wood chips in, once it solidifies and once it's room temperature, you're not going to be able to tell that it wasn't poured all at the same time, and it'll look like, you know, they were made that way. So that's how you do it. So then we grab and just put a few more chips on the top just to make it easier for the wooden wick to stay in position once we stick it in. And I'll show you here in a second, if we stuck them in too soon, what it would happen. So these are real hot. If I stick this in, it's more likely to fall over. It's not on this particular one, but they have in the past, depending on how hot the wax still is and how many wood chips are in there and that. But generally they'll stay in position You just can't wait too long. Once the wax starts setting up, then it's going to get hard like this, and you obviously can't stick a wick into a hardened piece of wax. So you got to do it while it's still liquid. And you can see that it's trying to tip over. And again, if it looks like it's not quite going to stay in position, you can throw a few more wood chips on it. And that's it. That's all there is to it. That's how we do it. We'll show some making the small fire starters in another video, but that's how we do it on the large ones.